Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 7 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. Now, of course, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about breakout performances at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback position. I'll sprinkle in a couple streaming defenses at the end of the video because it's been widely requested down in the comment section. So we'll talk about some streaming defenses later on in the video. But we're talking about breakout performances of players that not only have done it in Week 6, but in Week 5, guys that have been consistent week over week. It could potentially not only be picked up, it started immediately on many of your rosters and potentially help you get to the fantasy football playoffs and capture you a 2020 fantasy football championship. So we'll talk about a wide variety of players. Of course, 9 running backs, 9 wide receivers, 6 quarterbacks, and 6 tight ends, and then a couple streaming defenses after that. Before we begin, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. We just recently hit 30,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for that. We're almost on our way to 31K, 200 more subs. So make sure, if you have not yet already, click that subscribe button. We're making fantasy football content here on the daily for the entirety of the season. So make sure you go ahead and do that. Make sure you click the like button down below. It really does help me out a lot. Comment down below if you've got any questions, comments, concerns. Today's video was recorded before the Monday night game. So the Chiefs versus the Bills and the Cardinals versus the Dallas Cowboys are not included in this game. We'll talk about that tomorrow in our running back video at the beginning of the video. Outside of that, don't forget, this upcoming week, there are 4 teams on bye, just like this past week. The teams that are on bye week, the Minnesota Vikings, the Miami Dolphins, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Indianapolis Colts. So make sure you guys, make sure you get those guys out of your lineup. Make sure you have pieces to fill in for them because, of course, they're going on bye week. You're going to have to fill in some spots for those guys accordingly. Outside of that, we should be good to go. Thank you, everybody. And let's start talking about the running back position. Again, last week, many of you voiced down in the comment section. And again, I read every single comment down there. As much as I don't have much time to respond to every single one, I do read them all. Last week, a lot of you were saying that, Andrew, a lot of the running backs that you mentioned just aren't available in our leagues. And even though they say, or you're saying that they're widely owned, a lot of our leagues are pretty sweaty. And, I don't disagree. In a lot of my leagues, these players aren't owned, but I just throw it out there just in case. You never know. So on today's episode, I wanted to give a little bit of a more extended list of running backs, players that are somewhat handcuffs or potential upside guys down the road. And mainly guys that if in fact an injury is to occur, you can go ahead and pick them up, or guys that may not be owned right now, but definitely should be. So we'll talk about that as of right now, starting off with my number 1 running back on this week's waiver wire targets is Justin Jackson. I mean, he missed week 6. Why? Because they were on a bye week. In week 5, Monday Night Football against the New Orleans Saints, had himself a fantastic game. Let's not forget, a lot of us were assuming, and especially myself, and I was ridiculously wrong on this. I thought that Joshua Kelly would have the job, but Justin Jackson came in 15 rushing attempts, 71 rushing yards against a very stout run-stopping defense of the New Orleans Saints. Of course, he busted out a huge 41-yard run on that QB draw, on the running back draw. Regardless, the thing that was really exciting was the fact that he had 6 targets, 5 receptions for 23 yards. And the upcoming schedule for them is pretty juicy. I mean, when I look at what they have upcoming, of course, they play against Jacksonville, they play against Denver, but then they have Las Vegas, Miami, New York. That's the Jets. So again, these matchups are very good for the running backs of the Los Angeles Chargers. And as it currently stands, it seems like Justin Jackson's the go-to there. So if you did not pick him up last week, because he seems to be pretty widely available, you should go ahead and definitely pick him up because he's a starting running back until Austin Ekeler comes back, and that seems like another 5 weeks until we potentially get some progress or an update as to where exactly Austin Ekeler is in terms of his recovery. All right, so we go ahead and move on to the next running back, J.D. McKissic. J.D. McKissic of the Washington football team has played very well over the last couple of weeks. In a PPR format, he probably has already been picked up because he's on a consistent basis catching the ball 5-6 times a game. Just this past week against the New York Giants, 8 total rushing attempts for 41 yards, 6 targets, 6 catches for 43 receiving yards, 11.4 points in a half PPR scoring format. Takes on Dallas this upcoming week. So Antonio Gibson, even though he is the starter as of right now, if Antonio Gibson does not score a touchdown, he's kind of a middle of the pack kind of guy. This past week wasn't very successful in terms of yards on the ground or through the air, and it seems like J.D. McKissic is really kind of turning into this third down back for this team. Even though they're both getting themselves at least 4 to 6 catches a game, it seems like J.D. McKissic is getting more and more of a viable chance in the passing game for PPR format. So again, if J.D. McKissic is somehow still available, you can go ahead and pick him up as a guy that can definitely be started in the coming weeks with bye weeks coming along. Again, moving on, we have ourselves Boston Scott at number 3. So the injury that took place yesterday to Emmanuel Sanders is probably going to hold him out this week on Thursday Night Football against the New York Giants. So the Philadelphia Eagles, they've been competing. They've been a team that's full of heart, and I 100% commend them on the leadership and the way that they've actually approached everything in the last couple of weeks. I mean, they've really competed against top tier teams like Pittsburgh and Baltimore when the injuries just were stacking up for them. I mean, just this past Sunday, they didn't have Lane Johnson, their right tackle. Their offensive line is completely beat up. They lose Miles Sanders in that game. They lose Zach Ertz in that game, and they still only lose by 2 points against the Baltimore Ravens, who are supposed to be a playoff contender this year. So again, with Miles Sanders going down, probably potentially missing 1 to 2 weeks, Boston Scott is the guy to pick up in that offense. Always has himself some potential there. But again, last time we saw Boston Scott week 1, didn't really produce well. So just be careful. Just kind of a handcuff situation for those of you who are Miles Sanders owners going forward. Now we can go ahead and move on to our next running back that I want to pick up. I mean, Giovani Bernard really has the Mario mustache, and I can't blame him. Giovani Bernard, as of right now, isn't going to be starting, isn't going to be taking the place of Joe Mixon. I just want to be very cautious going into the upcoming weeks because every single week, Joe Mixon has an injury. He pops up on the injury list, questionable. He still, somehow plays. Just even yesterday, left the game with a foot injury, then luckily returned. But the thing that I kind of want to keep in sight, there's always a potential that Joe Mixon could get injured, does not come back, and you need to have Giovani Bernard on your roster if you're a Joe Mixon owner. So if in fact he's available, it's not a bad idea. I know yesterday he got lucky. He stole a goal line carry early in the game when the Cincinnati Bengals take a 21-0 lead. But again, Giovani Bernard, another one of these guys that if in fact he's given the starting role because of a Joe Mixon injury, could easily be a 13-plus point half PPR running back just based on the work in the passing game, the opportunity on the ground, and the goal line work for the Cincinnati Bengals offense. So keep an eye on that. Another player that could benefit due to injuries, another one of these handcuffs per se, JaMycal Hasty. So as of right now, yesterday, Raheem Mostert, Sunday Night Football, had an ankle injury. To the extent, I'm not exactly sure, but as the MRI comes through and we kind of see what's going on, he could end up missing some time. If that's the case, Jeff Wilson Jr. has been banged up. Of course, Tevin Coleman's still on the injured reserve, so it leaves Jerick McKinnon and JaMycal Hasty. I think Hasty, came out and had just as many carries as Jerick McKinnon yesterday. He's getting a little bit more and more work, the rookie. So again, another one of these guys that if in fact Raheem Mostert's going to miss some time, you could have a little bit of a replacement here with JaMycal Hasty as an option. We move on. Jeremy McNichols. So Derrick Henry was fantastic yesterday. An absolute train. 200 plus rushing yards, 50 plus receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, almost a 40-point fantasy game in a half PPR format. I think it was over 40 in full PPR, of course. Jeremy McNichols, as of right now, is the handcuff in that offense. And to be honest, he's getting a lot of work on third downs, which is always nice to see. Yesterday, 5 carries for 51 yards, 2 catches for 11 yards. Of course, we want to see him catch the ball more, but again, it's going to progress. He's honestly the handcuff. If you're a Derrick Henry owner, you could potentially pick him up. They play against Pittsburgh this week, so I don't expect complete success out of Jeremy McNichols. But to be honest, if in fact that offense is getting stuffed in terms of the running game, Taylor Lewan, their all-pro left tackle, out with an ACL injury, so that's going to definitely hurt Derrick Henry. But again, if you're playing against a monster defense like Pittsburgh, I know Devin Bush, their middle linebacker, out for the season. That's brutal. So again, when I think about what potential Jeremy McNichols has, maybe as a third down back could be, the Dion Lewis of this offense from a couple of years back and get you some utilization there in the upcoming weeks. So handcuff, of course, but maybe has third down back upside going forward. We're just going to have to wait and see. Moving on, a couple more names. Gus Edwards, he's going to be on bye this week, but it seems to me that Gus Edwards seems to be the guy that always gets the most touches out of this backfield on a weekly basis. Sure, he doesn't do much with them. 14 rushing attempts for 26 yards against, the Philadelphia front seven. Obviously, that's tough. He scored a touchdown, but to be honest, I don't know what to do with this Ravens backfield. It just seems like a trap, but hopefully they figure it out in the coming days. But of course, Gus Edwards is an option there. Keyshawn Vaughn, with Leonard Fournette dealing with injury, and LaShawn McCoy not looking great, I think Keyshawn Vaughn is eventually going to dig himself an opportunity in the upcoming weeks. Of course, he's in handcuff of sorts, but if Ronald Jones is to go down in the coming weeks and Leonard Fournette is not healthy, ready to go, Keyshawn Vaughn could be a guy that you could pick up and automatically play every single week based on the opportunity the running back position is getting for Tampa Bay. The last option on today's video and at the running back position is Frank Gore. The guy that's literally a million years old still seems to get it done. 11 carries for 46 yards, 4 targets, 4 receptions for 24 receiving yards. Had himself 9 points in a half PPR fantasy format. To be honest, he's just been on like a homecoming tour. He's played against the 49ers. He's played against the Miami Dolphins. He's played against, he's going to be playing against the Buffalo Bills this upcoming week. Every week he plays against the Jets because they're trying to lose. So to be honest, he's been somewhat reliable to an extent because he somehow is getting carries still in his backfield. I think that P. Ryan, the rookie running back out of the backfield, could get more work. We're just going to have to wait and see. It doesn't seem like that's where they're leaning towards. So Frank Gore just seems to have more and more viability as the weeks progress as their number one running back. So that's another option if you are struggling heavily at the running back position. Now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position and talk about some guys that, in my opinion, are probably already owned. So if they're already owned, don't worry about it. Just go to the next guy, go to the timestamps. But as of right now, Chase Claypool, it's kind of ridiculous. The reason I mention him is because he's only owned in 49% of Yahoo leagues as of right now. As of literally checking right now, I'm looking at the screen, only owned in 49% of leagues. Pretty crazy. This past week, 4 catches on 4 targets, 74 receiving yards, had himself another rushing touchdown, 16 fantasy points, plays against Tennessee this week. They got torched by Brandin Cooks and Will Fuller. Chase Claypool seems to be the guy. And it's no surprise because he put up 31 last week. He should have already been picked up, but I throw out the reminder just in case. Another reminder, Brandin Cooks. This is back-to-back weeks for him as well that he's had incredible performances. 9 targets, 9 receptions, 68 receiving yards and a touchdown, 17 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Plays against Green Bay this upcoming week, Green Bay looked like, they struggled, but they'll definitely turn it around this upcoming week regardless. Brandin Cooks and Will Fuller were just unleashed yesterday against the Tennessee Titans secondary. So again, Claypool against Tennessee, that's going to be nice. Brandin Cooks going forward with this kind of opportunity is looking like what I expected this offseason. I expected him to be a number 1 wide receiver on a team that needs a number 1 wide receiver. Him and Will Fuller have definitely been able to share that spotlight, and going forward should be great. We move on to Mike Williams. Again, in Week 5 Monday Night Football against the New Orleans Saints, had himself an incredible performance. Sure, we had Keenan Allen go down with a back injury, but regardless, Mike Williams stepped up and established himself as a go-to for Justin Herbert going forward. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 109 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Had an incredible performance. This upcoming week, they take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, Jacksonville can stop the run, and even Kenny Golladay had himself over 100 receiving yards in the passing game. So Mike Williams going forward, still going to be a pretty good part of this offense. And of course, with Herbert really airing it out, almost averaging 300 passing yards per game, is going to be a huge part with Mike Williams. We move on. Travis Fulgham. We talked about him last week. He's still owned in a lot of leagues. A lot of people looked at his performance against Pittsburgh and thought, you know what? He had a lucky week. I doubled down on that. I said it wasn't really lucky. It was the fact that Carson Wentz was hyper targeting him, looking in his direction every single down because there's nobody else to throw the ball to. And that was once again found out. I mean, sure, he scored a garbage time touchdown at the end of the game, but I'm going to take it regardless. 10 targets. That is the number I love to see. 6 receptions for 75 receiving yards and a touchdown. This upcoming week, Thursday Night Football against the New York Giants. Pretty good matchup with, of course, Miles Sanders out, with Zach Ertz out. If Dallas Goedert does not come back, Travis Fulgham seems to be the guy and the go-to for this Philadelphia Eagles offense. It must be picked up and potentially play this upcoming week for your league. We have ourselves T. Higgins, another one of these players one of these rookie wide receivers that are having incredible weeks. Besides getting a little bit of work on the ground, getting 1 rushing attempt, that's nice. That could eventually turn into some big plays, maybe a goal line touchdown eventually down the line. But regardless, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 125 receiving yards. I will take that on a weekly basis. Anybody will take that. T. Higgins really did step up with AJ Green having himself a decent game this season. So the fact that both those guys and Tyler Boyd was still able to get some work in the slot position gives me a little bit more of a, confidence in playing them on a weekly basis. This upcoming week, they take on the Cleveland Browns. Of course, Cleveland, the last time T. Higgins played against them, he had himself a pretty good game. So, again, we could just keep an eye out for that going forward. Should be an exciting play this week. We move on to our number 6. We have ourselves Emmanuel Sanders. Even though Michael Thomas will be returning, playing against Carolina this week, I still think that the amount of targets and the amount of confidence that Drew Brees has kind of connected with Emmanuel Sanders throughout the first 5 weeks of the season, I think having Michael Thomas out really did help Emmanuel Sanders and Drew Brees connect, because otherwise there wasn't going to be a connection there. It was going to be all Michael Thomas all day. So thankfully, they've got that connection. They've got a little bit of chemistry going forward, and I think Emmanuel Sanders, if he's available, which I think he's owned in like only 60% of leagues. Could be a good option going forward. In week 5, Monday Night Football, had himself 14 targets, 12 receptions for a $122. So let that not slide down the pasture because they had a bye week. Let's not forget that was actually what happened. He had a great performance. All right, we have Tim Patrick as our number 7. So here's the thing about Tim Patrick. 3 back-to-back weeks has been great. I mentioned him on Hidden Gems in week 5. They obviously didn't play, but in week 6, had himself a really good game in the exact same matchup that I expected him to play well in. So again, this is 3 back-to-back performances that we end up seeing him have incredible games, whether it's a touchdown, whether it's big yardage. This past week, 4 catches for 101 yards. They get Drew Lock back, and even though Drew Lock was turning over the ball at a little bit too high of a rate that we want, at least for this offense, I still think that Tim Patrick has kind of established himself as a number 2 wide receiver on this team, and going forward could have a lot of value in fantasy. That's why I mentioned him here. Henry Ruggs coming off of the bye week. They play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That secondary, they can be exposed, but they played very well. They were the aggressors in that game against Green Bay. They went from being the victim and losing 10-0 to being the actual assaulting team that was just destroying Aaron Rodgers. But that being said, Henry Ruggs, another one of these rookie wide receivers that could have another breakout performance. Last time we saw him had 2 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown because of that big play. So again, has the potential, if he's healthy, to have some good weeks going forward. The last guy I wanted to mention is Adam Humphries. Now, the reason why I want to mention Adam Humphries is because Jonnu Smith is dealing with an ankle injury. If in fact that ends up transpiring and he's not able to play, then we'll talk about a different tight end a little bit later. But it could open up more opportunity for an Adam Humphries if in fact we don't see Corey Davis come back. If Derrick Henry gets shut down against Pittsburgh this week, Humphries could be a good option to potentially pick up and play. We move on to the tight end position, and our number 1 tight end pickup for this upcoming week is Dallas Goedert. The information that I've been given is that Zach Ertz is going to be dealing with the high ankle sprain for the next 4 to 6 weeks. That means that we cannot wait until Dallas Goedert comes back. This week, if in fact Dallas Goedert is not playing, it's fine. You could potentially throw him into your IR slot and get him for the upcoming weeks. Let's not forget, in the first 2 weeks of the season, Dallas Goedert was incredible. Had himself 17 targets, over 130 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown in 2 games. So again, Dallas Goedert, a good part of that offense. If in fact he doesn't play, I think Richard Rodgers, the former Green Bay guy, that is currently the number 2 for the Philadelphia Eagles, could step up. But again, Dallas Goedert's the guy that I want going forward. Another tight end that I want going forward is Austin Hooper. On a consistent weekly basis, he has gotten targets. Just this past week, 6 targets, 5 receptions for 52 yards. Even with David Njoku coming back from the IR, Austin Hooper seems to be that number 1 receiving option for this team at the tight end position, which is nice to see. Again, they need a security blanket for Baker Mayfield. I think Austin Hooper going forward, especially against Cincinnati this upcoming week, could have himself a pretty good game. The number 3 option, Anthony Firkser. So here's the thing. Jonnu Smith dealing with the ankle injury. What exactly can we expect from Anthony Firkser? I mean, the fact that he had 9 targets, 8 receptions for 113 receiving yards and a touchdown just kind of gives you some perspective as to which kind of a day Jonnu Smith was in line to potentially see. That really could have been Jonnu Smith's points, but unfortunately did get injured. So again, they use the tight end position a lot in Tennessee. That's what they've always done, going back to Delaney Walker. So again, I think there's a lot of potential for Anthony over here to, in the stead of Jonnu Smith, get himself a couple touchdowns, maybe on the goal line in a play action scenario. We've seen him score over the last couple years and steal touchdowns. But again, if he's able to make plays in the passing game, because this Tennessee Titans team is going to be forced to pass, it ends up seeming like a pretty good streaming option if in fact you're in a bind this week. We move on to Darren Fells. Again, Darren Fells was able to step up because of the matchup. When you play against the Tennessee Titans, I mean, I've been saying it for week over week. The Tennessee Titans are giving up on average a touchdown to every single tight end they've played over, just already this season and last year. So again, every single week you want to play tight ends against Tennessee. Eric Ebron, I'm not even going to deal with him this week. But Darren Fells had a great week. Plays against Green Bay. Green Bay got themselves torched by Rob Gronkowski. So it could seem like if Darren Fells continues to be the starter of this team, Jordan Akins still dealing with injury, could be a great option. Speaking of Rob Gronkowski torching Green Bay, he had himself a really good game. I mean, the best game of his season thus far. 5 catches, 78 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Caught a pass on a corner route, and really did make Green Bay look silly. So again, Gronkowski's getting a little bit more into the groove of things. Could potentially be an option in the coming weeks. Plays against the Las Vegas Raiders this upcoming week. Again, Gronk is a viable option with him, kind of being the number one and Cameron Brate kind of disappearing, it's becoming hard for us to predict who exactly is the guy we can rely upon in this offense. But Gronk seems to be a guy that potentially, if is available, could be a pickup and play. The last mention I wanted to make was Irv Smith Jr. I thought he'd have a pretty decent game against the Atlanta Falcons. He once again did. Had himself another game of 5 catches and 50+ receiving yards. That's 2 games in a row. That's a good thing to see. Of course, they do go on bye week, but just keep an eye on him in the future. You don't have to pick him up. I'm just giving you the fair warning because, again, I could expect to see Irv Smith in the coming weeks or the rest of the season really get more and more involved in the passing game and really be a threat down the field, alongside, of course, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, who have been popping off. The last options for today, in terms of the quarterback position, we go ahead and move on and talk about, of course, Justin Herbert as our number one. Shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, looking at his last couple of performances, in the last 2 games against Tampa Bay and New Orleans, 40 for 59 passing. It's a 68% passing completion percentage for 554 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, only 1 interception. Plays against, again, I'll read their schedule: Jacksonville, Denver, Las Vegas, Miami, New York Jets. Those are some really advantageous matchups, and I think Justin Herbert, of course, should be picked up if he hasn't or wasn't last week. The next option is Carson Wentz. Interestingly enough, Carson Wentz, in comparison to a lot of these other quarterbacks, I mean, Justin Herbert's owned in 54% of leagues right now in Yahoo. Carson Wentz is 60% owned. That is honestly just, it doesn't make sense to me. Carson Wentz in 5 out of the last 6 weeks has scored at least 2 touchdowns minimum. And his upcoming schedule, playing against a lot of his division rivals in the NFC East, are going to be easy. Playing against the New York Giants, I'm okay with it. Playing against the Dallas Cowboys, I love it. So again, the fact that he can compete against Baltimore and Pittsburgh, 2 of the best defenses that are really going to push them to the limit and score as well as he did and fight as hard as he did, it just gives me a lot of confidence that you should definitely be picking up Carson Wentz in the upcoming weeks and playing him. So again, if he's available, go for it. Joe Burrow, playing against Cleveland this upcoming week. I know Joe Burrow's been struggling. Last time he played against Cleveland, 61 passing attempts, 3 passing touchdowns against the defense and secondary that has struggled. Again, they struggled yesterday as well. So if, in fact, you can take advantage, if you could potentially pick up Joe Burrow, he's owned in 65% of leagues, more than Justin Herbert, more than Carson Wentz right now. Another option that could be viable as a streaming play this week. Matthew Stafford, of course, I have to mention him. Even though the running game and DeAndre Swift, Adrian Peterson took over the game against Jacksonville yesterday, it does seem like going forward, he's going to have to pass the ball in order to win games. Playing against Atlanta this upcoming week, Atlanta looked like a completely different team, which I was hoping to see, and I'm glad that they ended up kind of turning over a new leaf and at least having themselves some sort of viability defensively and offensively. So Matthew Stafford's going to be pushed to the test. You got to play against Atlanta. They looked hot. Julio Jones was on fire. So again, hopefully he can use his arm. Get more than just Kenny Golladay involved in the passing game. My goodness, Marvin Jones is nothing as of right now. TJ Hawkins is only getting about 4 targets a game, which is it's not great, but hopefully Matthew Stafford could figure it out in the coming weeks. We move on. Teddy Bridgewater playing against the New Orleans Saints. Again, New Orleans giving up like the 3rd or 4th most points to opposing quarterbacks, 3rd or 4th most points to opposing wide receivers. You got yourself a quarterback here that has been playing well. Sure, Chicago's defense has definitely put it, kind of bottled it up a little bit yesterday. But again, when you have DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Mike Davis, there's always a potential to get more and more opportunity in the passing game, especially in that matchup where it could potentially end up being a shootout. So I think Teddy Bridgewater going back to New Orleans could be an exciting matchup, another one of these revenge games that could be exciting for them. The last option I wanted to mention, of course, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know Tua Tagovailoa got a little bit more opportunity yesterday in the back end of the game, but that was because it was a blowout. They're not going to switch quarterbacks. Fitzmagic has been incredible. A guy that, even though his upcoming games they don't seem like they're automatic plays, dude, he's been so good that on a weekly basis, you can start him regardless of the matchup, and he's going to produce. The fact that they play in a division where they get to play against the Jets another time this year and play against some of these easier matchups, and even when they get to the tougher matchups, when they play against Kansas City, it's fine. It's going to be a shootout. That's what Ryan Fitzpatrick lives for. Shootouts as a gunslinger himself, being able to air it out and just have fun. So again, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Fitzmagic thrown out there. The last part of today's video, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about a couple defensive waiver wire targets for week 7, a couple defenses that you can stream going into this upcoming week. The Bills is the automatic. They play against the Jets. If they're available, I want to pick them up. I know a lot of teams could have potentially dropped them this week because they play against Kansas City. I love to pick up Buffalo this week and potentially play them in week 7 against the Jets. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, they play against the Denver Broncos, then they play against the New York Jets. Those are 2 good matchups in my eyes in which they could cause turnovers, cause havoc, and potentially get some good fantasy points. So if in fact teams have potentially dropped them in your league, you could pick them up. The LA Rams, of course. I mean, another one of these defenses that disappointed on Sunday Night Football. It was unfortunate, but the way I see it, they play against Chicago at home. Here's the thing. Nick Foles has not looked fantastic. The question is, what exactly are we going to see from Nick Foles? I think there's going to be a little bit more of a sense of urgency from LA. They really did look like the lesser team in comparison to the 49ers yesterday. I think they're going to go back. They're going to watch film, reevaluate, recalibrate, and eventually, put their best foot forward. I think they'll be able to do that against Nick Foles. Nick Foles has been pretty successful against the Rams in the past, so we'll see how this functions. But as right now, another decent option, considering they had negative points, could be dropped immediately and potentially picked up by you. The Chargers playing against Jacksonville. Again, I don't trust Minshew. He makes mistakes. That offense hasn't looked great. Of course, DJ Chark getting 14 targets. That's exciting. But I think, again, the Chargers not a bad option in terms of one of these secondaries that could play well. And then, of course, if Joey Bosa is healthy and ready to go, could be a pretty big threat for the upcoming days. We have Philadelphia Eagles at number 5, Thursday Night Football, playing against Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones finally completed a touchdown pass. He hadn't did that in, 4 weeks, so it was a full month until he did that. But again, Daniel Jones got a lot of work on the ground. I think it's just going to be tough for Daniel Jones. Even though the secondary for the Eagles is horrible, I think there's a potential that the pass rush just gets to him and crushes him on a downly basis and really makes it difficult for him to make plays. Because regardless of what team he's played against, he's always been struggling this year. The offensive line's been falling apart. So, again, Philadelphia's pass rush could get there. The last option I wanted to mention is the Seattle Seahawks. Even though they play against Arizona, the Seahawks somehow still cause turnovers, score points defensively in fantasy. They'll give up as many points as you want. Doesn't matter. But they're consistently getting sacks, causing turnovers, and being able to make plays. So, that in itself kind of gives them some viability going into this upcoming week. That is today's episode. Those are my Week 7 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you click the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Don't forget tomorrow, running back rankings for Week 7. So that'll be out. We'll talk about the aftermath of Monday night's games, of course. Kind of give you some perspective as to if there's any other guys that you could potentially be picking up in the upcoming weeks. Outside of that, we should be good to go. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.